welcome to this fifth ERC Starting Grant Mentoring session. We are really quite excited about this session. This is a joint venture between the Young Academy of Europe and the Academia Europaea Budapest Hub. And before we launch into the session, a few housekeeping rules. Please have all of your microphones muted, and please turn off your cameras if you're not presenting. And you can add comments and questions in the chat. And you can do it throughout the presentation, and I'll keep an eye on it. And your questions will be answered after the presentations. And of course, you already know that the session is being recorded. We will upload it onto the Young Academy of Europe YouTube channel. So I now pass on the mic to Katalin Solymosi, who is the outgoing chair of the Young Academy of Europe and also the Vice Academic Director of Academia Europaea Budapest Hub. Katalin.
Warm welcome, everyone, in the name of the Young Academy of Europe and of the Academia Europaea Budapest Knowledge Hub. I am really glad to welcome you on this fifth ERC Starting Grant Mentoring event. First of all, I would like to introduce briefly the Young Academy of Europe, which is a bottom-up initiative which was founded in 2012 by ERC Starting Grant winners. Since then, we have been also accepting members with prestigious national grants, but all our members are independent PIs who are having interest in science policy. And many of us are also interested in mentoring, and especially with many of our members holding ERC starting grants, we were dedicated to trying to give back from this expertise to the scientific community. I'm also greatly honored because today we have among our speakers Alban Kellerbauer, who is one of the founding members of the Young Academy of Europe, a previous board member, advisory council member, member of Academia Europaea, who is now with us as head of unit at the European Research Council Executive Agency, and who will give some plenary talk. I'm also really grateful to all our participants, our mock interviewees and mock panel members who made this event happen. And I'm really glad to share with you that we had more than 200 registered participants for this event, and many of them are with us, which clearly shows that there is interest in the scientific community towards similar events. With the Young Academy of Europe since 2020, we have organized several similar mentoring events. They are summarized on this homepage. On the first event, in addition to general introductory plenary part on ERC, on the grant and how it is evaluated, we also had a talk by Eötvös Loránd about how to increase participation or widen participation from applicants from EU 13 countries. And this was followed by breakout sessions, which were domain specifically featuring one or two ERC starting grant winner Young Academy of Europe members who shared some tricks and tips and how they prepared for their application and how they were writing their proposal and so on. And I'm really grateful and honored and glad to have today with us two of the main organizers and also participants of that event, Thomas Susi and Mangala Srinivas, who were greatly involved with this event and also featured in those breakout sessions, and will be featured also today. Thomas will be one of the mock interviewees in the P domain, and Mangala will take part in the life sciences mock panel as expert. And so on the second event, we were focusing on the evaluation of the written parts of the proposal. So in addition to having some plenary talks again and a kind of discussion and tips and tricks or major challenges, or sometimes maybe typical comments that researchers from EU 13 countries get, we also organized mock evaluation panels, which were again domain specific, in which experts were discussing written proposals based on the written reviews received from the expert reviewers. So we try to provide insight into how shortlisting for oral interviews happens on this event. There is a very useful, of course, the recording is quite useful, and also the tips provided by Gergely Böhm, who is a national contact point at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences for ERC. So he also provided some presentation about typical errors, and we also have a document in which some of them, which are not often observed in applicants outside of EU 13 countries, are listed, and also some tips on how to improve your proposal if you are preparing it. The third event focused on the narrative CV format, which is not so well known in EU 13 countries. So we invited representatives of various funding agencies which are already using narrative CVs in their proposals and for evaluation, so who have experience with this. And the event also featured one Young Academy of Europe board member by then, Sarimildai, who is really convinced that she secured her ERC starting grant due to a well-written narrative CV in which she explained the challenges of her field, that it's a completely novel field, so not many citations are there because not many people are working in a completely new research area. And also she convinced them of her expertise, and this is how she's convinced that she secured funding for her grant, because narrative CVs can help in this respect a lot. Last year, we had an event in which we were honored to have Maria Leptin, the president of ERC, to introduce and discuss the recent changes in the evaluation and application process and why they decided to make these changes. And after that, we again had breakout sessions, which were domain-specific breakout sessions, featuring 2 or 3 either Young Academy of Europe or other ERC starting grant winners who shared their tips and tricks about how they prepared for the proposal, how they prepared their proposal. And this time we wanted to have something new, something that was missing, and it was to have an event which is focused after, of course, general introduction about changes in the ERC work programs, but which will focus after this general introductory plenary part more on the oral interview process. So in the first part, we will also have a lecture from Eörs Szathmáry in which he will discuss and provide some insights and tips for preparation for a successful interview. And then we will have, again, domain-specific breakout sessions, which will feature 1, or in case of the physical sciences and engineering domain, 2 mock interviewees. These mock interviewees are all Young Academy of Europe members who already successfully secured an ERC starting grant, but now they will, play a little bit or act like they did by that time. They will present their project in the allotted time. So depending on the domain, these will be shorter or longer speeches by the mock interviewees, and this will be followed by questions coming from the expert panels. And I'm really indebted, and I'm really grateful to all mock interviewees, of course, all our speakers, but also all interviewees and the mock panel members who are well and greatly recognized experts from the field, from Academia Europaea or Young Academy of Europe, and who are now donating their precious time for this purpose, so that we can make a mock interview, at the end of which, of course, the panel will also reflect briefly on the interview, the mock interview. We can also give some advice or tips on oral interview preparations, and there will be also space for Q&A. And of course, as previous events, also today's event will be published later on the YouTube channel of the Young Academy of Europe. In the name of the Academia Europaea Budapest Knowledge Hub, I would also like to welcome you. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers and at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, who helped me a lot with administrative and technical issues, but also in inviting experts. We have sent out almost 200 emails to get experts and panels and to organize the event. And I'm grateful to Katalin Borvölgyi, Nora Deák, and Anna Kuppuswamy in this respect. And very briefly, I would like to introduce the missions of the hub. So the first mission is dedicated to translating latest scientific knowledge and results towards society for the benefit of the society. An easily understandable example for this is, of course, translational medicine. So when latest research in medical research is translated towards patient care, but this can happen in other fields of science, of course. And the second mission is the one which is aiming at mentoring, helping the next generation of talents and helping them to secure towards scientific careers, and especially towards successful scientific careers. So the event that we are organizing today belongs to this category, or aims, or has similar aims to this mission. And of course, the third mission is to somehow improve and foster collaboration in the Danube region or within Europe among researchers. And one last initiative I would like to draw your attention to. You can find more details at this homepage of Academia Europaea. We have launched a call for several projects, and more than 27 are available on the homepage. They are launched. They have specific topics and a short description available on the homepage, and anyone, including Young Academy of Europe, Academia Europaea members, but also anyone from the audience who is interested, are open to contact us and join those projects in which we are trying to somehow, again, foster the translation of scientific knowledge towards society and actions. So with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I hope we'll have a nice event, and I'm really grateful again for everyone who is participating.
Great, thank you, Katalin. I'd now like to invite Professor Alban Kellerbauer. And like Katalin mentioned, he's also a starting grant. He was previously awarded one, and he was member of the Young Academy of Europe and now Academia Europaea, so one of our very own. So I'd like to invite Alban Kellerbauer, Head of Unit for Support to the Scientific Council. And he's going to tell us all about what changes are coming up, what we are going to expect in the next couple of years. Alban, the floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for the invitation. As you mentioned, I was one of the founding members of the Young Academy, and as such, I'm really happy to see it is thriving and glad to contribute to your activities. So let me go ahead and share my slides. So you should be able to see them now. If you could confirm that, please.
Yes, we can.
Good. All right, so I've been asked to present to you the novelties in the 2026 and 2027 work programs as far as grants are concerned, and application procedures, evaluation procedures. I will start by giving a brief introduction of the ERC and its grants, then tell you all about the changes in the work program 2026. Finally, also give a peek preview to the planned changes in the amendment of the 2026 work program, as well as the work program for 2027. And we will then close with a 15-minute Q&A session. So the ERC consists of two parts, broadly speaking. On the one hand, the Scientific Council with 22 members, all eminent researchers, scientists, and scholars that have full authority over the strategy of the ERC. They're supported by what in European Commission legal speak is a dedicated implementation structure, which is in fact the executive agency. One of the core principles of the ERC is scientific freedom, and that is illustrated by the fact that it put scientific excellence as the sole criterion for the evaluation of the grant proposals. It supports individual scientists, contrary to the other Horizon Europe actions, apart from Marie Curie, and there aren't any predetermined subjects. That is, it is fully a bottom-up program. The researchers themselves propose the projects. The ERC supports frontier research, and it does so in all fields of science and the humanities. The international peer review is stringent and is world-renowned. The executive agency, and in fact, you see here on the right the picture of our building from where I'm talking to you right now, has a number of important tasks. It has about 500 staff. In fact, the first one is the one that my unit is in charge of. It supports the Scientific Council in developing its strategy and in establishing the work program, the annual work program. It also executes the annual work program. In particular, it hands out the budget to the researchers. It implements the calls for proposals and provides information and support to applicants. It organizes the evaluation by peer review. It establishes and manages the grant agreements. It administers the scientific and financial aspects, as well as the follow-up of the grant agreements. And it carries out communication activities for stakeholders, such as this one, to potential applicants. The ERC presently has 4 main individual grant schemes that address different career stages. And in addition with the synergy grants, I'll come to that in a second. But the 3 first ones, starting, consolidator, and advanced, are individual grants given to individual researchers and depending on the place in their career where they are at the moment of making their grant application. So starters is from 2 to 7 years after the PhD, consolidator from 7 to 12 years after the PhD, and the advanced grants, regardless, to usually very eminent researchers, and the grant sizes vary from 1.5 to 2.5 million euros for 5 years. And then in addition, we have the synergy grants that are for groups of PIs, 2 to 4 PIs, can cover up to 10 million euros for 6 years. And one of these PIs can in fact be based outside of the EU or an associated country. In addition, there is a grant called the Proof of Concept Grant, which is intended to investigate a path towards innovation for ideas that arise from one of the other main grants. It's much smaller in size. It's a lump sum of 150,000 euros. Then, as I mentioned before, very importantly, in the evaluation of the grant proposals, excellence is the sole evaluation criterion. On the one hand, the excellence of the research project, its groundbreaking nature, its ambition, and also its feasibility. And on the other hand, the excellence of the PI, his or her intellectual capacity, the creativity, and the commitment to the project. Here are a few numbers of the ERC. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail. One important one is that already 14,000 researchers have been funded, over 950 research institutions, and 93 different nationalities of grant holders. In fact, grant holders can come from any country. The important thing is that they have to carry out their research in the EU or one of the associated countries. I'll come back to that in a second. And many, many important prizes have been won after the fact by ERC grantees. ERC is in fact part of Horizon Europe, the framework program for research of the EU. The budget of the ERC within that program, in the current framework program, which is called Horizon Europe, is 16 billion euros, which is 17% of the entire Horizon Europe budget of about 96 billion euros. Here's the evolution of the budget over the last 21 years. Well, up now. This is up and including the end of this framework program. So in the framework program 7, it was 7.5 billion euros. In framework program 8, which is also called Horizon 2020, it was already 13 billion euros. And in the present framework program 10, which is also called Horizon Europe, it's 16 billion euros. So you can see that from year to year, with some small exceptions, the overall budget handed out to researchers has been increasing quite substantially. And you may have heard from the latest announcement of the upcoming framework program 10, which will also be called Horizon Europe, or maybe Horizon Europe 2, that the budget for the ERC will be doubled to about 32 billion euros. So this is definitely good news for applicants. So what are the advantages of applying for an ERC grant? The ERC offers independence, recognition, and visibility. You can work on a research topic of your own choice. For a time duration of 5 years, you gain complete financial autonomy. You can negotiate the best conditions for working with your host institution. You can, with the prestige of the grant, you can attract excellent team members and collaborators. You can move with the grant. There's the principle money follows researcher. So if you get a better offer, for example, a tenure track position from a different institution, you can move there and the money from the ERC grant can follow you. And of course, again, the prestige can help you win additional and future funding as well. So let me now come to the work program 2026 and some of the novelties compared to the previous work programs. So this work program was approved by the Scientific Council back in March of this year and then adopted by the Commission, which is responsible for the budget, in July 2025. We are presently working on an important amendment to the work program 2026 to include the so-called super grants, and I'll come back to that in a little while. The provisional total budget for the call year 2026 is 2.7 billion euros. And I should also add that the additional income to the ERC from associated countries, which can be several hundred million euros per year, is never included in the figures that I've shown so far. So that is only the basic budget awarded by the European Union. This is a call calendar for the call year 2026. So as you will see here, the call year is not necessarily identical to the calendar year. And this is important when you consider, for example, the fact that you may not apply to two different grants from the same call year, even if they are in different calendar years. So in fact, today we opened the consolidator grant call for the call year 2026. You can see that the calls are always open for a number of months. So there's ample time to register and submit your application. The starting grant call opened back in July. It's still ongoing for another 3 weeks approximately. It closes on the 14th of October. And then provisionally, we have the advanced grant call opening in May, and the synergy grant call, in fact, opened also back in last July, almost at the same time as the starting grant, and will run until November. You can also see the budget figures that are allocated. Again, this is the European Union budget, and we can then add to this at a later stage the budget, the additional income from the associated countries. Now let me come to some of the novelties in the 2026 calls in this work program. So we have the eligibility extensions. There are now two new categories for which the eligibility window during which you may apply for these grants can be extended. On the one hand, we have parental leave. Already up to now, there were the two categories, maternal leave and paternal leave, with different times awarded. This has now been opened also to take account of, let's say, a new and diverse ways of parenting. And therefore now the general term parental leave has been added, and actual time taken off to care for children can be taken into account on application. Also, there's a new category of eligibility extension for any form of violence that one has suffered, can be gender-based or any other form. So applicants who have been victims of violence can now extend their eligibility window on these grounds. Then we come to an important point, which is resubmission restrictions. You have probably heard and seen that the application numbers for all grants are rising steeply. So in order to make sure that the panels and the evaluation system is not completely flooded, a few measures have been put in place that we call mitigation measures to limit a little bit the number of applications. And one of these is resubmission restriction, which means that if you have applied once and received a lower score than A in step 1 of the procedure, of the evaluation procedure, then you may not immediately reapply. So the existing rule is that for advanced, consolidator, and starting grant, with a B in step 1, you have to pause for 1 year, and with a C, you have to pause for 2 years. And this has now been extended also to the synergy grants. So if someone has obtained a B at step 1 for the synergy grant 2025, they may not apply for the synergy grant call 2026. In addition, there's now a 2-year rule which says that you can only apply for a next grant from the ERC within the last 2 years of your existing grant and not before, so you cannot have 2 concurrent grants. However, there are certain exceptions. If the duration of the current project is extended for some reason, then those 2 years may be extended as well. Then, very importantly, there's now a new proposal structure that has been changed. In fact, this concerns the scientific proposal parts B1 and B2. So part B1 can now be unchanged, in fact, up to 5 pages, but the content has changed. I'll come back to this. The part B2, which used to be up to 14 pages, is now limited to 7 pages, 10 pages for the synergy grant. Unchanged, the CV and track record up to 4 pages, and then resources and time commitment up to 2 pages more for the synergy grant. Here's a schematic of the evaluation process. Now we're looking specifically at the starting, consolidator, and advanced grants. There's a single submission, but this single submission of several parts, A, B1, B2, etc., is evaluated in 2 steps. In step 1, which is a remote assessment by the panel members, they only look at the scientific proposal part B1 and the CV and track record of the applicant. These are scored, and then in a panel meeting among all of the panel members, a score is given. There's in fact 4 different scores: A invited, A not invited, B and C. And only those that receive the score A invited are then included in step 2 of the process, where there's an additional remote assessment by the panel members and remote reviewers of the full proposal. So now taking into account all of the parts of the proposal, A, B1, B2, CV, track record, etc. Again, they score individually, then meet in a panel meeting to come to a consolidated decision. And in the second step, there are only scores A and B. And for the A, there's a ranked list that is established. And then, depending on the budget available, those proposals are funded. Feedback is given to applicants in all cases, both if they're excluded in step 1, if they're excluded in step 2, or if they're funded. So as I mentioned, the scientific proposal B1 is now changed, and in particular, the feasibility of the scientific approach will no longer be assessed at step 1. So that is then reserved for the more detailed proposal part B2 that exposes in detail the methodology that is chosen to tackle the project. So feasibility will now be looked at in step 2. For the synergy grants, in step 1, also the combination of the scientific approaches to address the scope and complexity of the research questions is now moved from step 1 to step 2. And again, in step 2, the entire project proposal is looked at, contrary to how it was before. Now, very importantly, I would like to share with you the evaluation questions that the panel members and the external reviewers address specifically when scoring the proposals. And this is important because these are really the only criteria that count. No other criteria may enter into the equation. For instance, the hosting institutions are not graded at all. They're not scored. They don't enter into the evaluation. So I'm going to read these to you because it's really important. The questions concerning the principal investigators are the same for step 1 and step 2. And they are, first, to what extent has or have the PIs demonstrated the ability to conduct groundbreaking research? So this has to do with the track record. To what extent does the PI or do they provide evidence of creative and original thinking? To what extent does the PI or do they have the required scientific expertise and capacity to successfully execute the project? And for synergy grants only, to what extent does the group demonstrate that it brings together the know-how necessary to address the proposed research questions? And when we look at the research project, there is some overlap of the questions. I will start with the questions for step 1. To what extent does the research address important scientific questions? To what extent are the project's objectives ambitious and will it advance the frontier of knowledge? For the synergy grants only, to what extent does the proposal go beyond what the individual PIs could achieve alone? Then in step 2, these questions that are now shown in blue come back. In addition, with now the full proposal available to the reviewers, we have the questions: to what extent are the research methodology and working arrangements appropriate to achieve the goals of the project? And to what extent are the timescales and resources adequate and properly justified? And for the synergy grants, again, separately, to what extent do the PIs succeed in proposing a combination of scientific approaches that are crucial to address the scope and complexity of the research questions to be tackled? So that is the full extent of the questions that are posed on the basis of which the proposals are scored. Now, let me come to the additional funding. This is maybe something you have heard of for some time now. An extra amount of 1 million euro has been available to address costs that come from the relocation or from the installation of a creation of a new project in a new hosting institution. This has been already bumped up to 2 million euros for applicants who are relocating to the EU or to an associated country from outside. So this is really a way to increase basically the funding of the grants from 1.5, 2 and 2.5 to 3.5, 3 and 3.5 million euros. So now what changes is in fact that there's now only one general category for this additional funding without predefined subcategories. So this was previously the case. So you had to explain the different subcategories, for instance, access to infrastructures, personnel, etc. This is now not the case anymore, but still the applicant has to define the purpose for which the additional funding is requested, has to be duly justified, and this justification will of course be checked by the evaluators, and if it's not duly justified, this requested additional funding can be reduced. It is possible to reallocate this additional funding based on the necessity for the achievement of the project objectives as the grant progresses. Another novelty is that the funding for the proof of concept grants that I had mentioned initially, which was 30 million euros up to last year, has now been doubled to 60 million euros. And there's a new prize, which is called the Public Engagement with Research Award, which will be given 8 times to 8 grantees, in fact, and is worth 10,000 euros each. But both of these, I should say, are available only to current grant holders. So they're not available to anybody. So the first step really is to become a grant holder, and that's, I understand, is the idea of this event. Then I think I will skip over this just to mention for completeness that some additional sanctions have been imposed on legal entities out of Russia, but supporting Russia in its war against Ukraine. And there's also some additional measures on research security matters, but again, not really relevant for this event. Now I'm coming to novelties that will be included in the amendment of the 2026 work program, and both for this and also for the next part, which then concerns 2027, I should say that all of these changes have been decided and proposed by the Scientific Council, but they only become legally binding once the work program amendment in this case and the work program for 2027 have been adopted by the Commission. So for the moment, this is what we are planning to do, but it's not yet legally binding. So you may have heard that President von der Leyen, so Commission President von der Leyen, announced very large and important super grants. This was at the Choose Europe conference that took place in Paris on the 20th of May. And we are working on implementing these grants. We will call them ERC Plus. And the Scientific Council is now in the process of defining the last details of this new instrument. We have, in fact, drafted the work program amendment and will submit it shortly to the Commission. And I cannot give you all of the details, but I can say this much. It will be a 7-year grant, up to 7-year grant. So to provide more stability for more ambitious projects, there's still individual grants, so given to individual researchers. Again, they will be awarded purely on the principle of scientific excellence. They're open, again, to researchers in any field and of any nationality, but wishing to work in the EU or in an associated country. The funding will be given as lump sums, as is already the case for the advanced grants of the ERC, but in this case, without these 1 or 2 million euro top-ups. So the amount yet to be defined will be the total available amount, but it will be larger than the advanced grant funding. They are designed to support really ambitious research led by individuals. And importantly, I should say, although they are aimed at people or projects eligible or reasonably made, project applications made at the advanced grant stage, they are accessible to researchers at all career stages. So there will be no restrictions in terms of time since PhD. Then I'm coming to an important novelty for 2027. So that's then the next year's grant calls. In fact, it is planned to change the eligibility windows of the 2 more junior grants, the starting and the consolidator grants. And in particular, the starting grant applicants will now be able to apply from 0 to 10 years after the defense of their PhD. This, until now, until the 2026 call, is 2 to 7 years. So it's a doubling of the time. And the consolidator grant applicants will now be able to apply between 5 and 15 years after the defense of the PhD. This now is 7 to 12. So you can see there's now an overlap of 5 years between the two, which was not the case previously. And the aim, the reason why the Scientific Council is planning to put this change into place is because there are different timescales for careers in different disciplines. And the Scientific Council wanted to give researchers, applicants, the possibility to choose more flexibly into which program they want to apply. But of course, it is up to each individual applicant to wisely choose the grant for which they apply, which is in fact in tune with their career stage. Importantly, again, this is a way of limiting the number of applications. researchers will only be able to obtain one starting grant and one consolidated grant in their lifetime, in their entire career. Otherwise, the rules for extensions to these eligibility windows, such as for maternity, paternity, etc., they will all are planned to remain the same. So as I come to the end of my presentation, I would now just like to point you to some further information you can find on the website of the ERC. And these are videos which we call ERC classes. They tell you everything about what to consider before applying, how to apply, how to fill in the application, the interview process, and how the evaluation works. You can obviously not click here now, but these slides will be distributed to to participants, and you can then follow this link and have access to all of this information. I cordially invite you to have a look at that. So, and with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I understand we now have a little bit of time for a Q&A. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Alban. That was really quite clear and very informative, and there's lots of changes coming along the way. So anyone who's got any questions, please do pop them in the chat and I can put it forward for Alban. Thomas has already mentioned that it's worth reading a document by the president, Maria Leptin, which gives a bit more of a flavor for what it is that what's been driving these changes. So yes, please do go ahead. While the questions are coming in, Alban, I had a question about the evaluation. You had listed quite a number of, so essentially kind of the person, the project, the location is secondary now. It doesn't quite matter. Is there any weightage for the different aspects, or is it sort of equally weighted, all of the different evaluation questions?
To my knowledge, there's no weighting between them, but each individual evaluator comes to a unified score. So I suppose that they may apply by themselves some weighting.
Oh, right. Okay. So there isn't a sort of 50% project, 25% person, 25%.
There's no such thing in place.
Okay. No such weighting. Okay. Well, I see a hand up. So, well, in the interest of time, I'll probably ask the person to unmute and go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm joining from Kenya. I'm Divine Gekonge. And thank you very much for the elaborate explanation on that one. I'm a PhD student in the University of United States International University, which is here in Africa, Kenya. And in particular, I'm also working in a university. Now, my question is this grants also applying in Africa?
So the grant is open to hosting institutions that are either in the EU or in an associated country. And please do a Google search. You can find easily which are the associated countries. There's quite a number of them. So applicants from anywhere in the world, all countries in the world, can apply for a grant, but the hosting institution to which they will then move has to be either in the EU or in an associated country.
Great.
Very well, much understood.
A couple more questions here. So is health and chronic severe physical disability taken into account for additional funding?
So for the additional funding, any reason can be indicated, and I suppose that's a valid one, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay. Right, so there are lots of questions that are coming in thick and fast. I'm going to try and keep up with all of them. Okay, so there is a question about number of papers, Google Scholar scores, H-index, do they all count? But of course, I think it's referring to the sort of narrative CVs question. Do you want to quickly answer that, Alban?
Yeah, so these let's say bibliometric scores are not taken into account. Applicants are invited to indicate a number of important outputs that they have produced. That can be anything ranging from a paper to a patent to important application, can be a commercial application, but this number is limited. So it's I believe it's 10 outputs that can be indicated, and the age index is not taken into account at all, for instance.
So there is a question about, are there any concrete examples demonstrating the ability to do groundbreaking research? Essentially, yes, how do you define groundbreaking research, I guess? I would assume publications, likely barometer, but what else are the panels looking for creative, original thinking, scientific expertise and capacity?
Yeah, I think it comes down to these outputs that I mentioned. So that could be, for example, a groundbreaking research paper. I mean, if things are not published, if things are not available to the general public, it's as if they didn't exist, right? So you do have to demonstrate that you have conducted groundbreaking or important research in the past, and in particular that this project is groundbreaking. And that, of course, you cannot do on the basis of publications. You have to do it on the basis of the project description.
There is a question that links up to the first question about the disability. Does it count towards the extra years after PhD? So essentially the extension eligibility, does disability, is it included? I'm assuming not, because you clearly mentioned violence.
Serious illness is included, for instance. So any time that you had to take off from your research career can be accounted for.
Okay. Okay, I can see that Thomas has been responding to some of the questions as we go. Thank you, Thomas. That's handy. Is there any information about how victims of violence or other types of violence what is the documentation that is needed to apply for an extension?
So generally, as I said just before, the important thing is if you had to take time off from your research. So this is also the case for this particular point. So if you have been a victim of violence and that has forced you to take time off from work, from continuing your research career, this has to be duly justified by a statement from your employer saying that you have had to take time off for this particular reason. This is, of course, treated confidentially by the ERC, but we do need this kind of documentation.
Do panel members know who the excluded reviews are? So usually in the application, they ask for excluded reviewers, but would the panel members know?
Well, since they send out the requests for reviews, I suppose they do.
They probably do, yes. Okay. How to apply to references? Avoid having overlap. I wonder how to... Okay, so is there another webinar where you mentioned that one should avoid having overlap in documents of B1 and B2? I wonder how does it apply to references? Should one use references in both B1 and B2? Or could you expect that most of the references are used in B1 already? Or should one cross-reference? So I guess the overlap between documents.
So I think that's not a critical point because the references don't count towards the page limits.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So, but you should back up information both in B1 and B2 with references.
Yes. So there is a question, it's a slightly incomplete question. It's about if one has lost a job or due to a visa ban or COVID. I'm assuming this question is in relation to the time post-PhD, or but it seems that the person is asking about if there was a break in career because of visa ban. Would that?
Yeah, visa, to my knowledge, is not part of the points covered. There's asylum seeking is one of them, and serious illness. So COVID could be covered by that, but visa, I don't think it is.
Okay, right. So I hope I have covered most of the questions that have come through the chat. It seems to be quite a few, but in the interest of time, we should probably move on. Let's thank Alban again for his fantastic talk, very clear, and thank you so much for all of the input. And we will probably ask for your help later on as well. Thank you so much, Alban.
Sure, thanks a lot to you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so now I have the pleasure of introducing Eörs Szathmáry, who is going to give a recorded presentation, and he is going to give us some tips about how to present ERC oral interviews, and also he's himself an awardee of an advanced grant and currently holds a synergy grant, and he is the director of the Parmenides Foundation. So now we will have the recorded presentation, which will give us some ideas about tips for how to attend an ERC interview.
Greetings, everybody. Since I have been on both sides of the fence, so to speak, I have been asked to give you some tips how to prepare for an interview for the starting grant. So let's get down to business. Obviously, the interviews are different from grant to grant. In the case of an advanced grant, you already have proved yourself. They just want to know whether what you want to propose is not more of the same, what you have done previously. In the case of the starting grants, you should demonstrate their potential. Obviously, an excellent written application is necessary. It's mandatory. Therefore, you have to make it sure that it's really excellent. And for that, you must look at previous successful applications. And when you have the first draft, it's very critical that you show it to others who actually know about the system. So those people who have already been successful with a proposal, and if you know past panel members, then you should ask them, you should consult them, and you should really modify when they ask you to modify something, and probably there will be quite a few items that you should modify. Now, before the interview, please note and be happy about it that being invited is already a promising sign, and you have made it, halfway. And the very important thing is that you really have to stick to the time that is allotted to you. That's critical. It makes a very bad impression if you cannot do that. In order to do that, you have to practice, rehearse again and again and again until it really safely fits into the time that you are given. And you have to be careful with that. I suggest to keep a safety margin of 15, 30, or even 60 seconds, because when you are on the stage, you may not actually follow very closely what you have been rehearsing. So it's better to keep a safety margin. Of course, that depends on how much time you have been given altogether. And now you should arrange for a mock interview, at least one, maybe more than one, depending on the feedback. And again, you have to ask successful previous applicants and past panel members to listen to you. And follow their advice very carefully. The slides that you are preparing must be informative, but not crowded. You have to figure the audience, and some people will be quite new to your proposal, and it should be understandable. It should be make somehow feel happy, right? Avoid the jargon. This is not good. Most panel members are actually not in your proper field. There are companies that are coaching you. It's a service, and you have to pay for them, or your institute usually pays in this case, because you have already earned it because you have been invited for the interview. And they can be useful more from the formalistic point of view, how to present, how to act, so to speak. My overall impression is that usually they are more useful than you would think, and they are less useful than they think of themselves. But overall, I think that the tilt is in the direction of being useful. But practicing with them is no substitute for the mock interview with the experts. They are complementary, so to speak. You also should prepare for questions. Some of them might be nasty, or you might consider them nasty. It's very important that you prepare themselves, and that, of course, the mock interviews help you to prepare for them. And if you anticipate such questions, obviously you can give better answers when they are really being asked at the real interview. There is also a trick that you can produce reserve slides, right? And depending on the panel, you might be allowed to show a reserve slide. Maybe not, but it's very important that just the practice of preparing such a slide gives you a template in your head to be able to answer the question that really comes to you. Now we get to the formidable 30 seconds after entering the room. First of all, relax. If you have prepared yourself, you should feel confident. And nobody is usually after you in the panel. They are for science and they are for you. In my experience, and I have been sitting on various committees, they really want to make a good job. So you can trust them in that sense. Now, if you have an instinct of feeling the atmosphere in a room like this, then it gives you some hint how it is going to be. It's not completely reliable, and not everybody has this instinct. So, but well, I happen to have it, and it helped me to see, okay, to feel the water, so to speak, whether it's warm or cold. And it's very important that not all panel members will have read your proposal. That's completely normal, because they have other proposals to handle, and some may just not be interested in your topic at all. And some people will be preparing themselves for the next interview where they have a prominent role, right? They will ask questions from the next applicant, and so they might actually just look at their computer or reading, files, these kinds of things. That's normal. That's not disrespect. That's not hatred. It just happens. A fraction of people will be very likely to do that. Now, giving your presentation, if you have prepared yourself well in the way that I have discussed, trust yourself. Talk clearly at a normal speed. Okay, that's part of the practice, of course. Now, usually the room is long. Don't mumble. It's very annoying if, the people in the back can't hear you. Try to look at the people also. Just don't fix like a hamster at a snake. Try to catch the eyes of those people who are really interested, but not only one of them. So switch from one interested person to the other and so on. And that's important. It's encouraging because their language, body language, and sometimes they are even nodding, that encourages you to go forward in a successful way. Some people, as I already alluded to, will not be even looking at you, maybe. But again, that's normal for the reasons I have given before. And first and foremost, keep the time. I have to ask you to be very careful with that again. Now, your slides, concentrate on the essentials. You will not have much time, right? But some things are very important. Why? Why do you want to do that? That's your motivation. What? What are the goals? How? of course, you cannot have given a complete overview of the work plan, but you have to actually draw the arch, okay? So from point one to the last work package or whatever, okay, what's the arch of your work? You must give a feel also to the people who haven't read it. Risks. Now, probably you won't have much time to discuss that, but this is where actually a spare slide could help a lot, right? You might respond better, or in this case, you might even be allowed to show the research slide about the risks. And also why you, I mean, your competence. You might actually cite some preliminary results or some spectacular paper that you have done in the past to be more convincing as to your talent, your personality. Now, then comes the time for questions, and sometimes some of them will be just for clarification because they don't necessarily understand everything. Now that's easy, of course, then you can show that you are very competent. Objections can come either from the panel members directly or indirectly, because there will have been external reviewers, and then they ask the questions that the external reviewers were proposing. It's very important. Don't freeze, even if they are not anticipated, right, by you. If it's anticipated, it's easy. If not, you always can ask for a clarification. Do you mean exactly, okay, that actually buys you time, and also in a mild way forces the person who asked the question to put it clearly. And in the meantime, the person may realize that the original question was not the best one. Okay? Now, during this interaction, even the panel members can mistakes either in what they are asking, or they can be, just cite something from the external reviewers which is not perfect. Now, if it is critical, if it's not critical, don't bother too much, right? I mean, just try to meander away. But if it's critical for your storyline, so to speak, then you have to state it that politely, but, well, I think I cannot agree with that because of this and that's important for my project. You can do it. I mean, it's actually make a good impression if you do it well, because you can actually convince them that you are competent and you can defend your project. Well, I mean, with this bunch of items, I would like to wish you good luck, but don't forget, as Pastor famously said, chance favors the prepared mind.
Okay, thank you very much. So Eörs Szathmáry could not be with us today, and with his lecture and the previous lecture by Alban Kellerbauer, the plenary part is now close to its end. So I just have now a few announcements. So we will try to forward your questions that remained unanswered due to time limitations to ERC, and if we get a response, then if we have your email address, then we might try to forward it to you. I guess with the registration, maybe we can look up your email addresses, and if you allow us, we might try to forward you the answers. And I would like to finally thank all our speakers, so the plenary speakers who made this event happen. And now we will start the next part of the project, in which I really need to thank, and I'm really grateful to all the mock interviewees and the mock panel members. We have more than 30 excellent scholars who decided and who gave us their precious time to make this event happen. And again, I would also like to thank the Academia Europaea Budapest Knowledge Hub for helping us with other organizational and technical details. So I will just now briefly present you the the three different domain-specific panels, and then you will be given a link, so you will be asked to join the breakout session you choose. So for the PE domain, we have Thomas Hussey and Monica Morales-Massis, who are both the previous or actual or current Young Academy of Europe members who will be the interviewees. They have a successful ERC grant that they will present in the mock panel interview. And we have 100 panel members with relevant experience. For the SH, so Social Sciences and Humanities domain, we have Scott Bremer, the chair of the Young Academy of Europe, who will present his previous winner ERC starting grant, and we have this mock panel. And for the Life Sciences domain, it's Nitzan Gonen, who will be our mock interviewee. And we also have a highly prestigious panel featuring, among others, several former Young Academy of Europe members. So thank you for your attention and for making this event happen. And then let's try to join the panel, the breakout session you want to choose and you want to follow up. All will be recorded. And later on our YouTube channel, you will be able to watch all these panels. And a last thing that came to my mind, you are warmly invited to watch ERC's YouTube channel, because they also have very useful videos dedicated to different topics. For example, also on the oral interview process, they have a video, but it's a different one. It's not looking like a mock panel interview, but it gives tips and advice on how to prepare for it. So see you in the breakout sessions, and thanks again for everything.